Hello everyone and welcome to SwitchUp. Today we've got another episode of our interesting game series. In this series we just pick 3 games each that we want to talk about. They could be old games, they could be new. They're just games that we feel we have something to say about basically, isn't that right?
Yeah, exactly right. So we've got some games here that, like Glen says, are very new actually, and a couple that I didn't even know had come out. And then Glen's got a couple in there that I've never even heard of. So it should be an interesting list.
Absolutely.
So as always guys, we've got our 10% discount for another month. So if you want to save some money on these games, buy your eShop credit if you're in the EU or US regions using code SwitchUp over at switchup.gg, and we get a tiny little kickback.
Good stuff. Right, which games have we picked this time? Well, let's find out.
Awesome. All right then, I'm going to start this time around. I think you were first up last time, and it's the game Commandos 3, which I didn't know had come out. Did you know it secretly snuck out?
No, and to be honest, I mean the second one when that came out a while ago on the Switch, there was a bit of fanfare about it, wasn't there? So I'm quite surprised.
Yeah, no, they've quietly put this one out, but so far from what I've played, things are looking a little bit better than that first game in terms of the controls.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have no real knowledge of the series. My first time with it was playing the Switch version of that second game. And as you mentioned, I was left feeling a little underwhelmed because of the controls. So this sequel port gets it right, does it?
Yeah, it's much better. So I am a huge fan of the Commando series. This was like one of the first games I got on my little 486 PC.
Yeah.
It's basically a top-down strategy game, whereby you've got different mission scenarios and you've got a group of commandos, obviously, and you're trying to basically achieve the goal. But each of your troops has their own abilities. So you've got like a spy in there, you've got a sapper that can blow things up.
Right.
They can all lie down. You can select the conical view of the enemy so you can see where they're, what they can see. But it was historically fiddly, even with a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah, see, I'm talking about the second game, not this third one, but I could see there was a good game there. I could 100% see there was a game that would have been appreciated and enjoyed in the past. It was just one of those where the conversion from mouse and keyboard to console hadn't been executed well,
Absolutely, yeah, that's what had happened. So I remember Glen showed me the first one. It was actually Commandos 2, I think. Was it the first one? Or yeah, it's Commandos 2.
No, it was the second one, mate, yeah.
And the controls just didn't work there. There were a couple of other weird things as well. And, the internet hates when games are changed since their original inception. We tend to look at historical things and say, well, we need to judge them by today's standards. So let's go and change it to appease the modern audience.
Right.
And they've done something similar this time around. Like at the start, when you boot the game up, it's like, do you want to use the Nazi flags, or do you want it to be all like just non-historical essentially, so as not to offend anyone,
right?
Which it's here nor there how you feel about that. You can just choose the historical ones. But in terms of controls, originally with the second one that was on Switch, it just wasn't great. It wasn't something you could pick up a controller and go, oh, this feels quite natural. Now they've gone for radial menus, which I think on a console is the only way to go when you've got multiple commands and things like that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, I'd played quite a few sim type games or strategy games before that one that had been brought across to the Switch, and the best ones always had radial wheels, as you said, and it's when you don't have that and it becomes incredibly cumbersome, doesn't it?
It really does. I'm actually surprised now, because in terms of console, I think most developers know that's the only way to go. A lot of these theme park games, a lot of these theme management games do the same thing now with radial wheels. So yeah, its controls are as good in my opinion as they can get. That doesn't mean there aren't times when it can still feel a little cumbersome. There's a few slightly, I don't know, like you have to hold one of the bumper buttons before you can rotate the camera. There's I think it's like LB gives you full control of the camera, which makes sense on a practical level.
Yeah.
But when you've played a lot of games, you kind of tend to just move the right stick and hope it moves the camera.
What's the difference between this and the second game? In terms of like the viewpoint, is it still isometric, or did they go sort of more 3D? What the main difference is?
So yeah, the second one was all if I remember correctly, was all isometric.
Yeah, I believe
Sure, it was. I think that included the interiors as well, but I can't. The vagaries of time have messed with my mind. But I'm sure I remember playing the third one, and it used much more 3D elements.
Okay.
But still in that same style.
Right.
It wasn't as good. Maybe that's a bit harsh. It wasn't as fresh, I'll say. It wasn't as fresh as those first two games. It didn't do much in the way of new ideas. But I'd still say it's worth playing if you're a strategy fan, particularly on a console. On Switch, we don't have many choices. And I think this is decent, and it's not too expensive. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's not too bad. So, yeah, that's my first pick. I think it's worth playing if you're a strategy fan, and it actually translates okay, bar a few minor modern-day quirks.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, well, my first pick is also a game from the past, brought back for a new audience, or a modern audience, if you like, and it's the Cowabunga collection, the Turtles game, but there's one game in particular that I want to focus on, and that is the first game for the NES, which was just called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which came out, I believe, in 1989. I'm pretty sure it was 1989. Now, it's funny with this game. I remember it back in the day. I never had an NES. My best friend at the time did. A couple of my cousins did. So I played enough of this game without ever owning it. But back then, everyone loved it. But over the years, it's kind of become derided and criticised quite heavily. Justifiably so sometimes, I must say. But it's still a game I really do enjoy. Have you played this one at all? Did you ever play this one?
I'm sure I must have done. This had an arcade as well, right?
No, the arcade game came out in the same year, but was a beat 'em up.
Right.
And the first game for the NES, which I think came out before the arcade, I might be wrong there. But anyway, the first one for the NES was a platformer, and then the second one for the NES was a port of that arcade game, which was like a year later.
Okay.
So this first one I'm talking about, is a platformer, but it's quite an interesting one. Hence the reason I wanted to talk about it, because when it came out, I get the impression, I don't know if it's ever been confirmed, it probably has, but I get the impression that developers knew absolutely nothing, or at least very little, about the source material. Now, obviously, the Turtles comic series obviously started as a comic series. I think, and this is where my dates might get a bit sketchy, I think the comic series started in 1984. I think I'm right in saying that. Okay. And the TV show that everyone kind of knew and loved came out in 87. And they were wildly different from each other. And the game was based on the TV show, but if you look at like the box art for that first NES game, it was very much based on the comics. So I get the impression that the devs were given a bunch of the comics. You know, it's based on this American TV show that's doing quite well. Go and make a game. And you can tell, because the enemies have nothing to do with the show. You know, it's quite an interesting period piece in terms of East meets West, you know, an Eastern team trying to make a property on a Western show.
Yeah.
But actually, in terms of the game itself, it is quite ambitious for its time. So you go around on like an overworld map, and there are certain areas that you can go into, certain rooms. You'll need to initially rescue April, and then I think you rescue Splinter after that. And you know, it's quite non-linear despite being a platformer. Something reminds me a bit like something like Simon's Quest, the Castlevania game, which was another game that over time became criticised because they're just a bit confusing, extremely difficult. But actually, if you can get rid of all that, if you can chip away at all that and just take it for what it was at the time, there is, you know, a decent, if very flawed, game underneath it.
Yeah, I'm kind of reminded of the Marty McFly, "Your kids will love this" line.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's definitely one of those sort of games. Like I remember really enjoying it as a kid. See, like I said, my cousin and my mate had an NES, and although they owned Super Mario Brothers and they owned Zelda, it was this and it was Mission Impossible. They were the two games we used to play the most, you know, the licensed games. And there's a level in this game based underwater where you have to disarm, I think it's 9 bombs.
Yeah.
And it's become like infamous over the years for being a terribly designed level and whatnot. I actually made that level on Super Mario Maker 2.
Yes.
As a little bit of a homage. So That was quite fun. But actually the level is very doable if you know how to kind of play the game and cheat the system. Because what you can do is there's a part where you have to go through this, it's almost like a toilet U-bend of electrified seaweed, and you have to get through. And there's very little way of not getting hit, because you know, like the old swimming mechanics in game where you had to press A and you kind of bounced up a little bit and you press it again and it's just very hard to get through. But what you can do is you can get through about halfway with one turtle, pause the game, switch in another turtle, get through the rest of the way, finish that level off, and then there's a little area after that level where you can go and replenish your health, and then you're back to full health and 4 turtles. So it's just knowing the little quirks of the game, you know.
Points to Glen. He knows it. Oh, he knows it all right. Nice.
You had to, otherwise you got nowhere, didn't you? You know.
Exactly right. So what in terms of structure of levels, does this have any non-linearity, or is it just A to B?
It's not A to B. The reason I say it's non-linear is because you have this overworld map. There are some areas that you'll enter that have no real relevance to the game. They're a complete waste of time. You'll walk through this warehouse, you'll get to the end of it, you might get a pizza that gives you your health back, but you've lost so much health getting there and you've got to get back yet. Do you know what I mean? Like, So it is non-linear in that you're not shown which way to go, but once you are on the right path and you know where you're going, then it is pretty much A to B. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense, and it does feel like, I was kind of joking about the Marty McFly thing, but it does feel a lot more like the games that people kind of look for these days. You know, they don't want the A to B straightforward. They want the red herrings in there, the little routes that lead them off, you know, off in the wrong direction.
Into a blind alley, yeah, exactly.
And they also want the challenge.
Yeah, well, what I will say about the Cowabunga collection specifically is that for that game and for the other 2 NES games, you can turn off sprite flicker and you can turn off slowdown. So if you want to play this game in as modern a way as you can, and it has a rewind feature and it has save state, so you can remove all of the frustration if you want, but you can also play it as it was intended at the same time. And it does make this, in my opinion at least, the best version of this game that's ever existed, officially released at least.
That's quality. I'm going to throw a red herring at you. This can kind of just be a little side discussion that we can have in here, because, you know, why not? I saw an article, it's like maybe a couple of years ago now, and it was basically saying that the only games that would succeed in the future would be ones that are kind of like sandboxy,
right,
where you can kind of create your own. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it depends, doesn't it? Because when you say in the future, I mean, the people that play games today, you know, younger people, I mean, by the time they're my age, your age, maybe that will become the new nostalgia, and that will become the new benchmark of what used to be, or what in my day we used to play, Grand Theft Auto 5, you know, whatever. But if you're asking me personally, no, because sandbox games are fine, but after a while I get a bit bored.
Yeah,
I'm quite a big fan of linearity in games, and with sandbox games, obviously that kind of goes out the window, and you do your own thing a lot of the time.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think whenever these writers say things like that, it's like, really? Is it? It's the same people that said, you know, physical media would go. The same people that said that books would be gone by now. And I was in a bookshop yesterday. It was lovely. Smelled great. Absolutely.
It's the same. I mean, you've mentioned Back to the Future a couple of times. Well, Back to the Future 2 had Jaws 15 playing and hoverboards, and I think we'll be all right.
Yeah. I think we'll be fine. All right then. Lovely. So my next game then. This is one that I didn't even know was out on Switch. And then I saw it and I was like, hang on, why is no one talking about that? But I can tell you why. It's because it's a cloud version.
Oh.
And it's Thymesia.
Right.
Ever heard of that?
No. I must be honest, that's not one that I know.
No, and I had never heard of it before. And then I did a bit of Googling, and it turns out it's right up my alley. It's a third-person Souls-like, essentially.
Oh, okay. Right, yep.
I mean, that's that's your description. Now, if you've ever played, which I think I know you won't have done, but there's a series called Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver.
I know of it. I haven't played it, you're right, but I do know of it, yeah.
So, amazing series. Everyone's always kind of lamented the fact that we haven't had a modern version of it. And it was one of the first games to include loading streaming, so that you never loaded. Like, why doesn't that exist now? Like, you never loaded. You just went through and thanks very much. That was a completely pointless little red herring.
Can I just add another pointless little factoid in here before you go on?
Please do.
I do apologise, but
no, I like these.
So, just talking about loading streaming, do you know that as far as I know, the first game to ever try to hide loading screens was Ridge Racer on the PlayStation, because the team were concerned that because it used a CD format, the loading times would be too long. So whilst it was loading onto the memory, you played a mini game of Galaxian, which is another Namco property. But because it was patented, no one else could do it. So you think we could have had no loading screens, we could have just been playing these little mini games, but because it was patented, it couldn't happen, which I thought was quite interesting.
Man, it's funny actually, because recently I've been playing a game where they've tried to get around that, but it's not a full game. It's just like a bit of info and some other bits and bobs. I know, like Lego Star Wars, you can control your ship and stuff and move it around, but man. Anyway, I've totally forgot more else. Oh yes, it was the first game. So there's the Legacy of Kain series. This feels to me like they're kind of trying to create a spiritual successor. Like your character feels very much similar to that original character. Have they done it? No, not really. What they've done is they've looked at every Souls-like in existence and they've gone, oh, well, let's do one. All right, how are we going to do it differently? Okay. Well, you can grab the enemy's weapons. All right then. That's interesting. And that then becomes a crutch. Like, you know, you do a bit of combat, the combat's fine, but then you do this move which grabs their weapon, and then that gives you a more powerful attack. And that's an interesting enough idea, but it never goes beyond that. And there are a lot of games that do it so much better.
Right. Not
necessarily on the Switch. I mean, we've got obviously Dark Souls, which does it as well as it can, really. But you've got Demon Souls on the PS5, which is like the A grade, really, of this style. And it's about the level design as well, putting in all those little shortcuts and things so that it doesn't become completely frustrating, so that if you do die, you can then go up a ladder rather than having to go all the way round.
Right.
Thymesia kind of does it, but I don't know. I don't think it helps in a game that's fast-paced as well to be cloud-based. Like, you know, we've had so many conversations. I'm not one of these just, oh, I don't like it because it's cloud.
Yeah.
You know, that's not the way that I work.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got several cloud streaming services for gaming that I will use if I have to. But there's input latency, there are other things. There's visually, I can tell a huge difference between a native game and a cloud game, especially on Switch. It doesn't seem to be able to do the streaming to the high enough quality, and this is with 1 gigabyte internet. You know, this is with as fast as we can get here in the UK.
Yeah.
So, and I also really feel like the value of gaming is being chipped away by it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't own anything. And I know you could say that digitally you also don't own anything, but at least it's native. At least I haven't got to have a incredible internet connection all the time for most of the games.
Yeah, I mean, I do have an issue with digital services, just generally. I mean, it's fine they exist, don't get me wrong, it's fine. But I just, like Netflix or, you know, services of that ilk are a good example, because, you know, I watch those sort of services more than I watch TV now, so I can see their relevance and their benefits. But when they remove your favourite shows and there's nothing you can do about it because you can't buy it, or on some of them you can, to be fair, but, you know, sometimes you can't buy them, or when the internet goes down so you can't watch it anymore, I just look at my Blu-ray collection and think that seems to work better for me, because I can watch that now if I want and there's no issue with it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I can understand in a future time it being the perfect way, but I don't think we're there yet, you know.
No, you're absolutely right. Things like, they seem much more reactionary now. They don't, series and things aren't given time to percolate. They don't say, oh, maybe the audience for this is going to take a while. They kind of look at those initial 6 months viewing numbers and they go, oh, I'm going to cancel that. So you can be halfway through something really good and it just gets cancelled. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a really good example. If you've seen this series, The Expanse, amazing. It was absolutely great series.
Right.
But it got cancelled. And essentially, it got cancelled, and Jeff Bezos of Amazon was a huge fan. And he just was like, I'm buying it. And you know, it's not like that for everyone.
Yeah.
But he bought it, took it back on, and it's one of Amazon Prime's most popular series, and it's incredible.
Right.
Man, I'm old.
Yeah, no, but even past the in my day moment, it's not even about that. Because like I said, I watch Netflix, and I just don't think we're quite there yet where it's as good a service as it will be. And for that, I still think that physical media has a place in time, you know?
Yeah, I'll see you in 2023 with a new blockbuster video.
I miss blockbusters.
So do I.
I miss blockbusters.
Oh, man.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Move on to game 2. So my next game is it's called White Day, a Labyrinth named School. Now, this has just come out on the Switch. As you're watching this video, it would have been last week that it released. And I have done a video on this, so I'll put a card up in that top right corner if you want the full story. But it was just another one that I wanted to talk about because, again, I think it's quite an interesting game. So it came out initially in 2001 on Windows, and it's a first-person horror game that at the time was proclaimed by some to be the scariest game ever made. Now, I don't go along with that, I must say, but I do appreciate a lot of what it does, because it's made by a Korean team, and it's actually set in Korea, and it's set in a school. And I just like, first of all, I like the fact that they kept that cultural aspect to it, because a lot of the games at the time were becoming westernized. You know, Resident Evil, for example, obviously made by Capcom in Japan, but set in a fictional American town. So it was nice that they kept that side of it. At the time of its release, there weren't many first-person horror games that I can think of. You had the Amnesia games. They're the only ones I can really think of at that time, 2001. Its story is quite interesting. So you're locked in this school at night. The initial threat to you is that there are the janitors that kind of become murderous at night and are chasing you down, and you have to go and run and hide. But then there's a supernatural side to it that follows. But it takes a lot of what has happened since, or it did a lot, of what has happened since first, you know. So it was the first game where you were quite defenseless,
right,
and you had to go and hide. You know, things like Outlast have obviously done it since. But anyway, that game was remade in 2015, and it was then ported to consoles in 2017 with a few other bits and bobs added to it, and it's that version that's now on the Switch. So it's a complete remake, you know, new visuals and whatnot, new voice acting, and I've just been enjoying it. You know, it's got that old school feel to it. It's got the frustration that comes with an old school game, especially a survival horror game. But it does a lot very well. And what I like most about it is that whilst you pick up a map, you're never directly led to your next objective.
Right.
You know, you'll meet characters that give you a bit of info. You pick up a lot of documents, a la Resident Evil again, where you're fed the backstory and given some hints as to what needs to happen next. But then you're left to figure it out for yourself. But it's never ridiculously obscure, which is good. But it also makes those documents feel relevant. It makes it feel like picking them up has a purpose, because there'll be times where you're like, where do I go next? You know, let's have a read of the last few documents I picked up, and then you'll you know, it will mention a few times the janitor's this, or the workman's toolbox is kept here, and it will mention that lock that you came across 3 doors ago, and you know, and you'll start to think, oh, okay, let's go and have a look then at the maintenance place, and then I'll see if there's anything there, and you eventually figure it out. And it does the old school thing very well, albeit there are some frustrating parts, you know.
Yeah. What does the janitor do when he finds you?
So basically, he'll chase you down. If he catches you, it's game over. You get killed, you know. So you it's not an instant game over. He hits you, and you have to run further still. But it's all about not getting caught. You know, it's you can escape, and if you hide behind something in the dark, he'll give up and go away. But generally, if you're caught, it's going to be game over. So you need to be quite stealthy, and it's quite clever, because you have to, if you turn a light on in a room, he'll come and investigate. So you need to use like your lighter, or you need to turn it on, do what you got to do, and then turn it off again. You know, it just makes you think about things that you would need to think about in that situation.
What's the janitor killing you with? Like his broom?
Nah, he's got like a big baseball bat. Yeah,
he should not be employed at school.
No, it's the health and safety standards in this school are appalling.
Terrible.
Don't mind telling you, mate. It's absolutely shocking. But it makes for a good horror game, that's for sure.
I won't be playing that ever.
No, but like I said, obviously it is a ghost story as well. It's not just about these janitors. and that is a big part of it. And there are ghosts and things in there and whatnot. But there was a jump scare. I mentioned it in that video I made. That got me. It's not even a particularly good jump scare, but I was playing the game with my wife, and we were talking about where to go next, and I couldn't find my glasses that night, so I was sitting right close to the telly, which I never normally do. And because of that, I was sitting further forward than her, so I had to keep turning back and looking, obviously to have a chat with her and whatnot. So I'd looked away from the screen for a minute, and I'd paused it to look at the map, so it kind of broken up the gameplay for a minute, so you're kind of off kilter in terms of the flow of the game. And I was having a chat, and I turned around, I turned it on, and literally as soon as I unpaused it, I walked 5 steps, and then there was a jump scare, and I crapped myself. Like, it was, nothing ever. I've watched a million horror films, I've played, nothing ever has made me jump as much as this. And it's not, I'm not going to give all the credit to the game. It was very much circumstantial, but it happened. I jumped, trust me.
Something happened.
Yeah, that's for sure, yeah.
Nice. All right, good stuff. My next game is Here Comes Niko. Have you heard of this one at all, Glen?
Yeah, I saw it when I was making the upcoming. It's like a 3D platformer. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a 3D platformer, but it's from quite a prolific team. It's from the same people that made A Hat in Time.
Oh, okay, right.
And it looks to kind of go along with this whole idea of cozy platformers. There's not a huge amount of risk, and the overall premise is certainly cozy. You're essentially applying for a job, which amounts to being nice.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So my kids have been playing this, and I've kind of been watching and playing alongside them. But it looks very accessible. I tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me of like the light, positive version of Demon Turf.
Yeah, it's funny because when I saw it for the upcoming, I instantly thought of that game. Actually, now you say it, yeah.
Yeah, it has a very similar art style actually. And I think this came out. This has been out previously, hasn't it? I think.
I believe so.
So it's seen its re-release on Switch. I think it was out on Steam before.
Right.
It's very well loved. It's one of those. It's weird, I find, when some of these games release their game without sending any codes, without any fanfare at all, and they kind of get forgotten.
Yeah.
And this is a prime example of that. I think on Switch particularly, this could have really done with a nice little boost from a few channels saying, hey, this is really interesting, you might want to check this out. And I think a lot of the people even watching now might be like, wow, that looks awesome.
Yeah, it did, going back to the eShop, because that's where I spotted it, but the screenshots definitely looked appealing. It had like a summer holiday feel to it in terms of the look of, the aesthetic of it, but I seem to remember the blurb didn't do it a huge amount of favours. It just didn't really give you enough to make you it force you into that decision of, right, yeah, I'm going to buy this one,
Exactly right. Yeah, and how often is that the case on the eShop? They either don't show a trailer or they give you a really lame description.
Exactly.
It's amazing. Like, it's very cool. You end up working for this little frog. Like, it's giving you all these different tasks, and it's, as far as 3D platformers go, it's quite linear.
Right.
But it works well. You're on the island. It gives you a set of tasks, and you just go off and do them. But then you move on to the next. It's quite linear in that regard, but it's really well done, and I guess it maybe is aimed more towards younger children in terms of some of the tasks being a little bit fetch questy, and isn't that part and parcel though of these like classic platformer style games?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day you had it was about collectathons back then, wasn't it? Which could come via some sort of fetch quest. But they've kind of become an established part of that genre, I would say. It
does a couple of things that certainly annoyed my daughter. There's like these little mini games. Like it's got a full Tamagotchi in it, which I thought was, and actually that's interesting because there's a Tamagotchi on the loading screen.
Oh, is there?
You can feed it and you can do So I'm like, ooh, they better watch out for Konami. Is it Konami?
No, I think the patent's finished now, so I think there's no bother on that front. I think that's long expired, so that's fine.
Oh, perfect. There you go. But it's a very funny game as well. There's a lot of little humour in there for the adults as you're watching. Not dodgy humour, just funny stuff, little references to films and things like that.
Right.
It's just a game like a few of the ones I've been playing recently that is putting a bit of a smile on my face now. I'm going to give a bit of a precursor, but I'm playing Dreamlight Valley at the moment for review, the Disney game. And obviously by the time people watch this, I would have already got the review out and they'll know. But it's way more enjoyable than I thought it would be. It's one of those games like this that really emphasises just having fun.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because games for a while almost felt like they had to become so hyper-realistic that they almost become like menial tasks, you know? Like,
exactly.
It's strange, isn't it? That maybe we are starting to reach an era where the fun element is being remembered again, which is good.
For the win. Nice.
Okay, well, my last one, similarly quirky, I think, and one of the strangest names I've ever seen in a game. It's called Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion. Which I bought the other week and I've just got around to playing, and it's a top-down adventure game. You know, I guess it's quite a lazy comparison, but you know, similar to the old Zelda games, just to give you some sort of idea. So you play as Turnip Boy, and the mayor of the city that you live in has told you just suddenly that you owe, you know, a whole bunch of tax, and the only way you're going to pay it off is by doing jobs for him.
Okay.
So then you get sent off to do a bunch of quests, and it's fairly standard in that respect of, you know, you need to go and get this from here, and then you navigate the world and get there and fight some enemies, beat a boss, get whatever it is, go back to him. But it's you know, it's fused with a nice level of humour, quite self-referential a lot of the time, and the mechanics work well. You know, it's it lies heavily on the vegetable aspect of it. There's a lot of humour that relates to that, and you know, you get a watering can, for example, that you can then use to water certain plants that will sometimes open up like a portal, say, or they'll create a bomb will grow out of it, and then you could use these elements to solve puzzles, environmental puzzles. It just works very well. It's a very charming little game. I don't know how much it is on the eShop. I'm going from the physical version that I bought, but I bought that for £15 the other week, and by the time I'm finished with it, I've heard it's not a very long game, but by the time I'm finished with it, I can imagine I would have had, you know, my money's worth out of it.
Yeah, I think it's £13.49 on the eShop.
Yeah, see, I mean, it's funny because I've just told you I've paid £15 for it, but I am judging that on a physical version, and you know me, I'm very much a physical collector. I wouldn't necessarily pay that for it digitally, as stupid as that might sound, just because I don't like to buy digital games. I'd happily pay that bit more to own it physically. So maybe some sort of sale, even, you know, 10 or 20%, I'd say, off that, and I'd be quite happy to pick that up digitally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it now and listening to what you say, and to be honest, before you've mentioned a game called Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion, I wouldn't have looked at this twice in the street. But it looks nice here. The visuals look nice. It looks like there's a bit of variety in terms of, you know, where you go. I can see this like snowy, foggy area and stuff. And the price for me as a digital, essentially, collector, which is an oxymoron, I'd pay that a bit, but I agree, about, you know, £8 or £9 on a sale would be ideal.
I would say so for a digital version. Yeah, like, I know I just said I paid more physically, but I just feel it's a bit different. But in terms of the game itself, like I said, it's fun, and we just mentioned, you know, that's the bit that maybe we forget sometimes. It is fun to play. It's quirky. And I like the way it's starting to drip feed in new mechanics. So I'm not far enough in yet to give a definitive verdict on it, but I can see already the way that it's drip feeding in those mechanics that it's going to continue to do that, and it will build up to a very pleasant game by the time you've finished, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it looks nice. I like the premise as well. It's an adult premise in a kid-style game, and it looks cool.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, a fun little game, I would say. Worth having a look at for sure.
Awesome. All right, well, that takes us to the end of our 6 interesting games this week. Let us know in the comments if you've been playing any interesting games as well. We do still, as I said at the start, have our 10% discount on eShop vouchers over at switchup.gg using code SwitchUp if you're in the EU or US regions, and we get a tiny little kickback and you save 10%.
Absolutely. There's also a Play Asia link down there if you're interested in importing any games. Use the link, use the code. It does change, so have a look at the code stated in this video and you'll save yourself 5% off of an order from there.
We should have had a market stall.
Absolutely right,
there you go. Derek Trotter, eat your heart out.
And Rodney, you plonker. Lovely. Yeah, all that's left to say then is thank you to our Patreons as always for your continued support. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.